too long.
Well, it loops.
Yeah.
So until he shuts it off. Still turn off.
Yeah, what can I say? Peas in a pod.
Welcome, friends, to this celebration of the life of Carl Hovey. For the last year and a half, I was privileged to conduct Sunday services over at Oasis, and got to know Carl and Marilyn as we worshiped together. I would begin the service each Sunday with a quotation from Matthew chapter 11. Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." On behalf of the family, I want to thank you all for your attendance today to honor this man who touched so many people during his lifetime. The family has asked me to announce just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First off, if you would please silence your cell phones to respect the spirit of these proceedings. And then secondly, for those who have missed it upon coming in, there are 2 tables in the back. And on one side, there's a guest book. On this side here for you to sign if you haven't already. And that's so the family can remember who attended, as well as a place for cards. On the other side, there are sheets of paper and pens to record any memories you might have or messages, which will be put in a scrapbook for the family. So feel free to do that at the conclusion of the service this afternoon. Thirdly and lastly, there will be desserts and refreshments served next door at the bistro. So help yourself to those after we're done here, and use that for a time of fellowship together. Also, we learned today that Carl was an artist, and on the back 2 tables are 2 of his beautiful paintings that are displayed there for you to see today. With that, the family wants us to have a party. Let's get started with this party. And the family has asked me to share a bit about Carl's life. He is the man we're here to thank God for and to honor. Carl was a beloved son, husband, father, grandfather, friend, and teacher who passed away at the age of 86 on September 27th, 2022. His life was truly a testimony of servanthood and dedication to those who knew and loved him. He was the youngest of 8 children, growing up in Cape May Courthouse, New Jersey, all of whom of his brothers and siblings have preceded him in death. He survived by his wife of 63 years, his loving wife, Marilyn, his daughter and son-in-law, Elaine and Don Davidson, 1 granddaughter, Angelique Davidson, and a multitude of nieces, nephews, and their descendants spread across the United States. Carl left New Jersey after graduating from Middle Township High School to pursue the study of education at Arizona State University. During this time, he met his beautiful wife, Marilyn, who herself was a transplant from Indiana. They married while attending Arizona State University in 1959, and they both graduated with Bachelor of Arts degrees in 1961. Carl considered himself blessed to have worked his way through college via his employment at the Student Union Building on the ASU campus in Tempe. Carl and Marilyn moved to California shortly after their graduation, and Carl began his teaching career in Torrance. Meanwhile, he pursued and achieved his master's degree in education from the University of Southern California. In 1967, the family moved to Vista after Mr. Hovey accepted a teaching position at Potter Junior High School in Fallbrook. After 1 year at Potter, he accepted an administrative position in Yorba Linda and became assistant principal and later principal at Yorba Linda Junior High School. He returned to teaching in Fallbrook in the spring of 1974 and served as principal of the San Onofre School on the campus of Pendleton Marine Corps Base before returning to the classroom for the remainder of his career at Potter, teaching primarily U.S. history, but also instructing others in the skills of typing and speech. He also coached basketball and track and was a lunchtime advisor for the organization called Braves for Christ. They met on the campus during their lunch break. He was quoted as saying that my students have been more of a blessing to my life than I ever was to theirs, but if you ask his students, they would say otherwise. He'll be remembered by his students as a tough but fair teacher who desired to prepare them for both college and a life as a whole, and a life well lived. Upon his retirement, after 37 years in education, Carl devoted himself to the pursuit of becoming a fervent prayer warrior and began a prayer ministry alongside Marilyn. He was able to speak at chapels and Christian clubs on various aspects of prayer, and he developed an entire curriculum that he could use to instruct others in the blessing and art of praying. He also worked with the Gideons International for several years. While Carl was not able to see his full vision of teaching this prayer curriculum to the larger Christian audience, he enjoyed many other pursuits during his lifetime, including designing his home, gardening, playing guitar, oil painting, spending time with his family, and exercising. He was a blessed and kind and enjoyed resident here at Meadowbrook, and we thank God for his life. May peace rest on his memory. Now I'm going to turn things over to family members who want to share some of their special memories of Carl.
Follow you, right? Okay, I got it. I want to welcome all of you to this celebration of life for Carl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Amen. Where's mine? I thank you for coming. We've been here for 6 years, and we have really enjoyed meeting people who are so wonderful and caring. I said to someone recently, I wish you'd have met Carl when he was younger. Well, I think you just kind of met him with a summary of his life. He never considered himself an artist, though, and as far as I know, he never had an art lesson. But those two paintings back there were after a trip to Hawaii. He took pictures, and he was really, we have the same ocean here. It's the Pacific Ocean, but he just got more out of it in Hawaii. He also painted the interior and the exterior walls of our house, which was a practical side. As I was thinking, it's hard to summarize 63 years of life. They go so quickly. But I was thinking back, the first year that we moved to California, we were recruited at Arizona State by someone that really described Torrance as being this wonderful place, but they forgot to tell us that the traffic and the fog. And the first morning we came, it was one of those June gloom mornings that's typical, but we didn't know that. We were not ready to go back. But we had a contract because we were going to teach summer school, which that was a whole blur. I don't remember that summer at all because we were about one step ahead of the students. But he was very fortunate. His first 7 years of teaching was a K through 8 school, and about 4 teachers taught the 7th and 8th grades, and they were taught to be real responsible because they were younger children looking up to them. And I don't know if they have K through 8 anymore, but he did. And also, his principal was a Christian and invited us right away to his church. So we got to meet his principal and his wife on a personal basis that first 7 years of our teaching. Somewhere in that first or second year of being in California, we were renting, and at that time you could rent without. having furniture, which is a good thing because we didn't have any. And some of you may remember those days where everything we had, we brought in the car with us. And the person that lived below us, because we were on the second floor, was a student of karate. And those apartments were not as soundproof as it is here. And so Carl thought it would be better to make a friend of him. He was a pretty good sized man, but he was, I guess he was light on his feet, but it didn't seem like it when you're on the second floor. But one day he invited us to a tournament that he was in, and we felt we'll support him. And he forgot to tell us that Chuck Norris was going to be there. And of course, Chuck Norris was well known for karate then, and he won all the matches and won the tournament. But it was somewhere at the lunch break, he was telling the teachers that he had met Chuck Norris. And it got around to the students. They said, Chuck Norris knows Mr. Hovey. And of course, the way he met him was he was part of the audience. But he was a little amused by it, but he also said, you have to watch how you say things because they can be turned around and mean entirely different than what he meant for it to be. So that's sort of an inside story. But a few years later, quite a few years later, 2011, we were invited to attend a Labor Day weekend retreat. It was held somewhere in Pennsylvania. I don't know exactly where, because once we got off of the airplane, we were taken to where it was. But the several people that were expected to attend knew Carl's brother. He was a pastor. He had been a pastor and a missionary from the Philippines, and he was also head of the Child Evangelism Fellowship in New Jersey. So he was this man's brother. He was always the younger brother, and he knew that his widow would be there. And so we had that Labor Day weekend, and we made the decision to go back Monday because we thought first we'd visit his sister, but we found out the next day was Tuesday, and if you remember, the 11th of September that year, there were no planes going that day anywhere. And we also found out that the second plane was not too far from where we'd been in Pennsylvania, the one that crashed, where they stopped them from going any further. But one thing that we always did, we always prayed before we went on a trip, and before and after, and we felt we knew why we needed to come home on Monday that day, that week. Some phrases that he would say that he wasn't perfect. I think we then turn to the other person he was talking and say, and you're not either. And that either started a conversation or ended it. And I don't know if any of you were involved in that conversation, but I was quite a bit of the time. And then he always liked to say, let's pray about it if it was something that, well, almost anything he would say that too. And words that come to my mind that I always thought he was special and sincere. He could be stubborn. And he always wanted to be taller than he was, so I'd have to say he always felt he was short because he liked to play basketball, but he was never involved in being a guard or a forward because he was so short. But he ended up coaching instead. But he also had a unique sense of humor, I understand, and sometimes misunderstood. But he knew he was blessed and loved, and he referred to his family members as special and beautiful. That's his eyesight was going too. But that's okay. He received a number of awards, and some were on wall plaques. I have one back there that he especially appreciated because it was from the Students Associated Body at Fallbrook. And I don't know if you saw the pictures. One of the pictures showed a number of people kind of dressed like he was, but his last week he had a kind of a certain style of dress, and they kind of honored him his last week at school. But he appreciated the handwritten notes that were written by his students or the parents of these teachers just as much, and he still has. They're in a box. He still kept them. But we were once told by an adult Sunday school teacher, "Be careful how you spin your dash." So Carl's dash was from 1936 to 2022. And I'd like to read what was written within a card the family received recently, which kind of summarizes the same. Where it said, "Death leaves a heartache no one can heal, but love leaves a memory no one can steal." And I see people in this room that I know have lost loved ones, and they've had to move on, and that's a process I'm in. But we found the poem that's written in your program years ago, and he wanted to share those same thoughts to the one who was left, and he was pretty sure it was going to be me, and to our family and friends. And as nice as it is here, Carl is where he wanted his last move to be. Several times during the last year, he said, "I'm going to be moving." And then he'd say, "You're not going with me." So I knew what he meant, what he was thinking. And I'm going to leave that note with my daughter to follow. Yeah. And some of you have met my daughter, our daughter. It's still hard for me to say was and mine instead of our, because if you saw the pictures, you know there's not too many pictures in that were without me in it, because we were there for each other for 63 years. And you're going to make it, you are, because I did. She has helped me. In fact, she's done most of this program putting together, and so she's worn out, I think. And she hasn't shared with me what she's going to share, so we'll learn together what she thinks of her dad. But I know he thought a lot of her.
What's funny is I typed that up for her, but I didn't cry when I typed it. When she talks and she elaborates on it, then she makes me cry. There's a reason why she went first. So again, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. For me, it's easier to use a wireless mic because I do this at church. So rather than having to stay close, I can move around more. So hopefully that won't be too bothersome to anybody, but thank you all for being here. I also want to take a second and thank those who will hopefully, Lord willing, see this video later. We have, as we mentioned earlier when Pastor West was talking, I have lots of cousins and second cousins I've never met, but thanks to Facebook, we've become friends and have found each other. And they are all on either the East Coast or Midwest, so they couldn't be here today, but they've all showed interest of wanting to be able to learn more about their Uncle Carl. So Lord willing, this video will be able to be uploaded and they can learn a little more about him through all of our recollections today. So I wanted to give a shout out for their interest, because that's a testament to the fact that this man is a legacy, that people who've never met him or seen him in a photo or heard a story from their grandparents who were his siblings, they want to know more about him, even though they never got a chance to meet him or they were really tiny when they met him. So one day, maybe we will meet them as well. So anyway, as I stand here in front of you, I remember being a kid in grade school and having to deliver an oral book report in front of the class. And while writing came fairly easy for me, and I loved reading the book, the thought of getting in front of people and speaking about the book did not really make me excited. In fact, I was quite terrified at first. And I remember that my name was called And I went up front and I had my report in front of me, and I wrote off my book report as I had written it. And the teacher, after I was done, said, I can really see you understood, the book and you love the book, but, you need to get up and look out at your audience to engage in them, and my father, who at one time did teach a speech class himself, would probably have told me the same thing, but thankfully, Dad taught in a different school district than I did, so I never had to sit in one of his classes. So I didn't get to hear those words from him, but I'm sure he would have said the same thing. But that experience was over 40 years ago, and since that time I've written a plethora of reports and given countless presentations in my career as a physician. And I hope that my technique has gotten a little bit better since then. But I can say without a doubt, this is the hardest presentation I've given because of its subject matter, certainly. So I'm sure you and he would understand if I spend a little more time looking down at my paper and not make as much direct eye contact as the teacher would have wanted me to. I also have a pact with my husband, Don, that if I hit an emotional roadblock as I'm reading this memoir, I'm going to give him a cue to come up and read the rest of the novel for me. So I did promise him if that happens, I'll mark my spot so he knows where I left off. So I have a pen up here just in case. As you're about to see, I inherited my father's gift of gab and creative writing. So settle in for the roller coaster ride. My father was known by most as a dedicated educator. He was Mr. Hovey. We actually there's a little placard that was on one of his desks that we put in the back that was from someone had made. I don't know who made it now, but as I just mentioned, I was never in one of his classes, which is probably a blessing. You never want to be the teacher's kid in a class because there's always that sense of favoritism. So, but because I watched him work and I felt like I was part of his scholastic journey, even though I was never one of his students. He enjoyed teaching, even the tediousness of creating lesson plans, and he took great pride in his work, even down to the bulletin boards in his classrooms. He would come in early to construct. He wanted the room to capture the theme of the portion of American